Hi, Chris Brown here. I teach a couple of courses at Kendall College of Art and Design, and they recently commissioned me to put together a template application to help students publish to iPads and Android tablets with only fundamental Flash skills and not necessarily any advanced coding knowledge. So we put together the Kendall Digital Media Flash Framework, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how it was put together. So here we have the framework published. We click Start. You can find some instructions, some credits, a little information about what it is, and we click to go in, and by default, it is a template that holds about a dozen or so ActionScript 3 examples, samples with code snippets that would be useful for a student putting together, say, an interactive storybook application to be able to use little bits and pieces to make things interactive. So, next and previous, playing animations on a timeline, making a sub menu, drag and drop capability, loading a separate Swift file, unloading, playing video, controlling a movie clip, starting and stopping sound, clicking to an external link, jumping to a particular page. We also have the drop-down menu to jump to any of the pages. Besides using the pagination, outputting a message, using the accelerometer. If we switch over to the mobile view, you can see the application on an iPad. You can see as we tilt the device around, we can move the ball around. And also to detect whether or not the device is online, which is useful for mobile applications. Besides the pagination buttons and the menu, we also have a global pause button and a mute button. So let's take a look under the hood. First off, I'll take a quick look at the directory structure. Basically, we'll be working inside of this KCAD Flash Framework.fla file. Now, you can certainly change the folder name to whatever you'd like to keep track of what your particular application is. But this, all the files within here, without having to change a lot of different things, need to be kept the same file name and the same in the same positions also. So we're working inside of the KCAD Flash Framework.fla. We'll come back to that. For now, we have a certificate. I'll talk a little bit more about that towards the end when we're publishing for Android developer. The assets folder. Now this is a folder that I leave open for students to put all of their Photoshop files, Illustrator files, artwork, sounds, videos, all of their assets. They're going to go into their application to keep them within the application folder, but still have an area to keep everything together, but keep all of the important parts that they can't change around untouched and unscathed. We have a couple of default loading screens for the iPads, some icon files of different sizes, some other certificates, mobile provisioning files for iOS. We have the application descriptor XML file, which this is a lot of what goes in behind the scenes to make sure all of the publish settings are set up properly for Android, tablet, and iPad devices, so the students don't have to worry too much about that. We have the actual Android file. We have the AS file, which is the main class, which holds most of the underlying code for the framework. Flash file will jump back into the iOS file, the Swift, which is the web-based version, README file, which gives some instructions that I'm pretty much going through in this video. Then we have a SWIC folder for external libraries, the SWF folder, and the video folders are both included when the application is packaged because these are made for the students to enter in your own SWIFts and videos and load them into the Flash file. So when we go in and take a look at Flash here, we'll just start the top layer here in the main timeline. We have a size guide. So we have these resolution gates. If I zoom out a little bit here, you can see that we have these different size of showing regular iPad, even all the way out to the Retina display iPad. The most common 10.1 inch and 7 inch Android displays, and then the universal desktop web displays. So there are actually some advanced variables and methods built into the framework that will allow you to programmatically build a responsive design, but it's usually beyond the scope of the students' projects, and we typically choose one or two layouts and just target them using this. Okay, so then we have the actions layer, which just basically has a stop action on the timeline as we hold on the first frame. For the load screen, now all of these screens and buttons that I'm about to go through, these are all just simple movie clips or button symbols that once you have a fundamental idea of how to get around in Flash, you can simply change out these assets and start to make this your own project. So it'll go inside of the load screen. Okay, simple enough. We're just inside of a movie clip, and you can change the load bar, which will fill up as it's loading on the web. All right, we also have on the second frame, that's pretty much the load screen besides the background and the HTML background down here that are for graphics that will just persist across all pages in your application or in your storybook. And those will be there permanently, so you can either just remove those completely or place a nice background. And then we'll go into the pause screen, and we have a start screen, which some applications prefer a screen to start with as like a title screen that you simply hit a button to enter the application before you all of a sudden have the menu and the paging arrows. So this is the movie clip that you would use. If you don't want to use this, you can simply right click on the layer, turn it into a guide layer, which will make it not active, but it also won't break the code in the framework. I have a header, just again, anything that you'd like to persist across all of the pages, permanent header, you could use in that movie clip. Now the buttons movie clip. This one holds, let me hide the start screen, there we go. This one holds all of the framework's built-in buttons, the pagination buttons, the pause, mute, and the menu. Now, these, with the exception of the menu, which I'll come back to, these other buttons are just simple button symbols you could go inside of and change the up, over, down, and hit states and use whatever buttons you'd like. You can put them anywhere on the screen. The drop-down menu is a component. You can look into the Flash help reference materials onto how to skin components, but in short, in the library, inside of the component assets folder, you can find all of the symbols that you'll want to skin to try and change the color and size and things of the drop-down menu. So if you don't want to use some of these buttons, you can simply click them and drag them off of the screen, but don't delete them. If you delete them, then it will break some of the code that's trying to talk to them in the framework, but you can certainly drag them off stage and then they just won't be utilized. Okay, so once you have changed your background and your buttons around and all the stuff that kind of persists across everything, then we go into the Pages movie clip. Now inside the Pages movie clip, this is where right now we have all of our example pages showing the ActionScript 3 examples. So on each of these, let's say we'll go to play animation. So if I go inside of this movie clip, now this holds an actions layer that just has a series of keyframes with a frame label on it that defines the page name, and then an accompanying movie clip which holds the page. So inside of this movie clip, now we have a new timeline, which might as well be a new Flash file. We can do anything we like inside of this page now. You can see that on the first frame of the actions layer, we have some simple button commands showing how to set up a button and make it play an animation across the timeline. So each of these pages has similar examples. So go over to the, let's see, go over to the video one. You can go in here, see all these different layers. We're using a video component here, and there's a little more action script for the video, but there's a few comments explaining what different things do, a function to make the video loop when it finishes and things like that. But these are all just nice samples. But what the framework does is it automatically reads these different frame labels, and it will create pages to use the paging buttons through. So setting up your own project, what you would do after you were in the main timeline and again replaced the loading screen, the pause screen, of course decided what size you want to use with the resolution gates there, header, skinned your buttons the way you'd like to use them, any backgrounds. Once you have all of those global elements in place, now you can start working on your individual pages. Now the first step would be to remove all of these example pages. Now I always recommend to save a copy. This main one named KCAD Flash Framework FLA, it needs to stay that name because of all of the publishing XML file and all the different things connected with publishing. It needs to stay that name, but it's a good idea to make a copy of it, do a save as and save it as like, you know, examples or AS3 examples.fla. So then you can retain these examples when you'd like to reference them in a working version. But just to illustrate what we would do to start creating a new application or a new storybook with this is we'd start by just getting rid of all of these examples. So I'm going to select all of these keyframes. It's going to hit Shift F6 to clear all those keyframes. And now I just have an empty actions and pages layer. Now I should be sure to put the stop action back into the actions layer so that when we set up our pages, it doesn't just play through all of them and it sits and waits. But all we need to do with nothing else in here, again, I can go ahead and delete all of these different pages that were in the pages folder in the library and all the page assets as well. I'll just leave them in there for now. It's not a big deal, but basically we have this nice and organized, so all the component stuff is together, the main interface things are together, just so those don't get lost or confused. Plus it's a nice place for you to go through the list and make sure you've skinned everything you need to. But then the pages and page assets folder are really for you to keep all of your imported graphics and all of the symbols that you create organized at least at the top level of the library. So now all we have to do to create new pages really is just make frame labels. So we will go ahead and make page 1. So we're doing a demo and we'll keep it simple and clear. Create a couple more pages at 10 keyframes apart. Give them frame labels, page 2 and page 3. Now without even creating movie clips, we can publish and start using the paging arrows, and the paging arrows actually are dynamic in that they know whether there's a next page or last page. You can see how with only page 1, page 2, and page 3, even though we don't have anything on the screen to differentiate on what page we're on, we can tell that at least the buttons are showing up the way they should, as if 3 pages were there. So now we want to keep this main timeline clean and clear. All we have to do to add pages is just create movie clips across our timeline. So we'll put keyframes on each of these. Now I'm going to keep this real simple and we'll just use a couple of shapes. I'll just put a nice white square on page 1. We'll change that to a red circle on page 2. And on page 3, put a green polystar. Polygon, I guess. Alright, so we simply just put these shapes and keyframes in the pages layer directly underneath. And we're going to go ahead now at this point. Now this isn't absolutely necessary to see what's there, but the whole idea is that with fundamental idea of Flash, you come in here into the main Scene 1 timeline, and the students don't need to touch anything on this except for just changing graphical assets. Everything else just works. You don't need any code. And then you go into the Pages timeline, and to create pages, you simply add keyframes with frame labels. Now under those frame labels, you want to create a movie clip, which, okay, I left that name symbol 1. It's very good practice to match the name of the frame label that you're using. And you want to create a movie clip symbol out of each page. Page 3. So that the first 2 levels deep from the main timeline, where you adjust all of the backgrounds and button graphics and pause screens and load screens, you just go in and edit symbols and change around the graphics to change all of those. And then inside of the pages layer, this is really your main timeline that you want to keep your separate pages organized by keyframes with page labels. Now, if you create a movie clip under each page label, then once you're at the 3rd level deep inside of your page, you now, and this is the same level where all of the example files that we showed earlier on that pages timeline, they were all a movie clip that you double click into, and they have lots of action script snippets to get you started. But once you're on this timeline, you can treat this like a brand new Flash file. You have your fresh timeline, any animations that you want to make. You want to follow the golden rule of animating in Flash to stop from getting the evil tweens in the library is, number 1, make sure it's a symbol. Number 2, make sure it's on its own layer. But the idea is that from here, you can very simply, without knowing any code really, you can just start putting your graphics in, put a couple keyframes in, create a couple symbols, and you can start creating a linear step-through application or storybook. Now the idea is, of course, that within each of these pages, the students play around with the interactivity and make some things that you can drag around or tilt around, or play with little simple games within each page. But this provides a starting place that would take up a lot of the semester just to get to this point if we were starting from scratch. So it's actually worked really well, and the students have come up with some really nice projects through it. One thing to note is the mute is global. Whether you have videos or multiple sounds, that will mute everything, which is useful when you click away from the window or the device loses focus. It will automatically pause and mute. And the pause has a really nice recursive feature where you could have a dozen movie clips nested within each other, all animating different parts of a character, and the pause button will loop through all of them and pause everything and unpause everything correctly. So the final piece of the puzzle is publishing. So once we have that, once you have your pages timeline filled out with all of your movie clip example pages, or application pages, storybook pages, whatever it is that you're building, then you'll want to go to the properties panel, and you can choose either Air 3.4 for Android or Air 3.4 for iOS. Now for Android, you click the little wrench settings here, and everything is already preset in terms of the settings, the names, the versions. You may want to check the icons when you switch between Air for Android and Air for iOS, particularly this 36 by 36 will kind of get lost. So you just want to make sure if one's not there, you just click the folder and go find it in your application directory. There we go. Okay. The permissions, languages, general, don't have to worry about. The deployment tab, this is where you have to have the certificates. Now for Android, this is just a self-signed certificate. You could create a new self-signed one yourself here through Flash if you wanted. But you have the password, which is KCAD, DM, KCAD, DM, digital media. And you would click to install the application on your connected Android device and probably launch it, and voila, that would create the Android application for you. iOS can be a little more difficult because in order to publish, you have to already be a member of the Apple Developer Center, $99 annual payment, and then you have to go in and again the icons, you want to check the iPad icons, make sure they're all there. The deployment tab is where it gets complicated because you need not only a certificate but also a provisioning profile. Actually, on top of that, whether you're developing or deploying to an app store, you have to have separate versions of those also. But that would be another tutorial session in itself to go through this process with Apple. There is, in the accompanying blog post to this video, there's some links towards the bottom to the Developer Center, as well as a good tutorial or reference from Adobe explaining kind of how to go through this process and get these documents. But once you have these documents, then you can use the developer certificate with the password, the mobile provisioning center or password, and you can go ahead and publish. Now, you can't publish with the ones that we have in place with the application here because Apple actually ties the publishing to a specific device, and we use this to publish the students' works directly to our Kendall iPad and Android tablets. So if you want to use this to publish for Apple, you certainly can, and all of the presets are there, but you'll have to set up your own account and your own app ID and really learn the Apple publishing process. As far as publishing for the web, if you try and just target the Flash player, you'll get compiler errors because some of the error-specific functions that are used in the apps will throw them. But when you publish for either of these, the Swift file that you need for the web version is automatically generated because it's used to create the two app files. But that's what you would use to then publish with SWObject or some other way onto the web. So that's a quick little getting started with using the Kendall Digital Media Flash framework here. It's available on GitHub, on a link again in the blog post below the video, and I hope that helps you get started. Thanks.